Okay. Show me.
What's up YouTubers, Dutch in the house, thank you very much for tuning in. And this here is the Holybro Kopis Mini. I've had it for a couple of weeks, I've been flying it a lot, so here is my review of this quadcopter. And when I say review, this video will actually mostly be tips and tricks. See, the review part, I could sum it up with excellent quadcopter. I'll get a little more into that. There are obviously some pros and cons to this quadcopter, mostly pros, which is why I decided to well, get into some tips and tricks in case you decide to get this quadcopter to make it perform better, right? So we are actually into some flying straight away with the Holybro Kopis Mini. What you see at the big picture here is from a GoPro Hero Session 5. So that immediately answers the question if this quadcopter can carry a GoPro easily. I hardly noticed it. Is that true? Yeah, I could notice it in the flight time a little. The flight time definitely suffers from adding a GoPro, obviously. Other than that, the quadcopter still is a capable, lively quadcopter with a GoPro strapped to it. What you can also see here in the bottom left corner is my FPV feed. This flight was in the evening. You can see that from the sun over there. And I can still very well see where I'm going, which is always nice. That was one of the concerns I had with this quadcopter. I had not tried the Foxeer Razor yet. So yeah, I was a little bit concerned about that FPV camera, since it is somewhere in between budget and premium. It's definitely not the most expensive FPV camera, but works out pretty well. I can sense that it's not the fastest FPV camera. It is definitely aimed at freestyle cinematic flying, which is, I guess, appropriate for this quadcopter. I can sense it, since I am used to lower latency FPV cameras, but you'd only notice it when flying fast through forests, for instance. If you'd be running this quadcopter as it is intended for freestyle maybe and for cinematic flights, you wouldn't notice it. And as you can tell, the FPV camera works out pretty nicely. So what you can also see is that this is a stable platform for videography. Very much so. More on that in a few minutes when I get to my tips and tricks on this quadcopter. There can be improvements made to this quadcopter. What you actually see here is with those improvements already made. So if you take the quadcopter out of the box, it'll perform well, but it can perform better. So again, that's why I'm including some tips and tricks on this quadcopter. Will probably actually even help you out on other quadcopters, but again, we'll get to that in a few minutes. Back to the bench. So let's start with the cons. Why don't we? It's a very short list. In my unboxing / show and tell of this quadcopter, I mentioned this, the connector for your FPV antenna, MMCX. The cable with the MMCX connector over here. It sticks out to the side of the quadcopter, as you can tell. So that looks a little fragile, maybe? Yeah, it doesn't look really clean. It is mostly protected with a cage or an action camera if you mount that on the quadcopter like so, which you should, because it adds a lot of functionality to this quadcopter. So yeah, in daily use it hasn't bothered me. I haven't had severe crashes with this quadcopter at all. But you'd have to get it stuck in a tree in a particular way for this to be a problem. It can be. I would rather have not seen this on the side of the quadcopter, but in reality, in most cases, it won't bother you at all. Second thing, you might have seen Bruce's, the XJet or RC Model Review's review of the DJI version of this quadcopter. He mentioned the strap, and that's completely different in this Mini. You can position the strap all the way from here to here. But also the sticky pad they ship with this quadcopter is very sticky. It's almost like a Yuma grip, if you know that. And if I press a Lipo into it, I can almost... yeah, it falls off. But as you could tell, it is very sticky. So if you end up having to mount your strap over here, maybe like so. No, further back. Here you've got an action camera, then your Lipo over here, and maybe the strap can barely hold on to the Lipo. That grippy silicone stuff will help you out a lot. So that works out pretty well, I'd say. One con this quadcopter actually does have is that it sometimes has a small desync, or small desync. It has a desync on one of the motors. You'll see in some of my flight footage that one of the corners of the quadcopter dips. It didn't crash, it wasn't a flip of death, but it definitely was a desync. I hope to be able to show you one clip of it. It's a very short shutter in the quadcopter, basically. And I haven't been able to replicate it often. I've seen it happen twice. And I made a change to the BL heady settings. I'll show you that in a second. After that, I haven't seen it again. So when you take this quadcopter out of the box, it is definitely a con. Holybro should have fixed it. And yeah, that's it. After watching this video, you won't have that problem. Okay, and the last con you might experience with this quadcopter depends a little on your intentions with this quadcopter. See, if you add a flight battery, which obviously you will, and you want to add an action camera mount and a GoPro or a Runcam 5, this quadcopter will definitely not be below 250 grams. I don't even have to weigh it. This will not be below 250 grams, not even close. And basically, in my mind, this quadcopter is so capable. If you fly it without an action camera, which you obviously can, you constantly feel like the quadcopter is asking you to add more weight. It's not too powerful. A quadcopter is never too powerful, but it definitely feels like a quadcopter that, well, is built to carry an action camera. So keep that in mind. You can run this quadcopter below 250 grams with a smaller Lipo, 650 mAh 4S. It will be a capable, fun, freestyle quadcopter for sure, very much so. However, the quadcopter is again so capable, partly or mostly because of these motors and maybe the ESC. It is very much capable of carrying a full-size action camera. Even like a GoPro Hero 8, it can easily carry that. So keep that in mind. If you fly the quadcopter like that, it won't be even close to below 250 grams. That is, however, also one of its pros. See, somehow this quadcopter is a very, very stable FPV and camera platform. More stable than most 3-inch quadcopters have any business of being. And why is that? Probably because it is a little heavier. It's not super duper heavy at all, but it is a bigger 3-inch quadcopter, as you can see. It is also very powerful. These T motors, 1507 motors, are actually candidates for a custom built, a self-built quadcopter. Very, very nice motors. They never got hot in any of my flights, even aggressive flights, I never got them hot. Then the frame, it is pretty stiff. I can bend it a little bit, but hardly. In flight, however, you can see from the resulting videos that it is a stable platform, so there's not a whole lot of flex in this frame. Otherwise, it wouldn't be this precise. You might have seen Jello, maybe. It would have been hard to tune, which it's not. So the frame itself is also basically a candidate for a self-built quadcopter. This frame is available separately, so that might be something to keep in mind. It is a spacious frame for self-built, so that's also very nice. All in all, this is a very nice package. The used electronics are top notch, I'd say. A full-size F7 flight controller, a capable VTX. I've had nothing but good FPV experiences with this setup. The FPV camera works out, and I think the star of the show are these motors, the T motors. Very, very powerful motors. Especially probably in combination with these 3.1 inch propellers. So in short, if you are looking for a quadcopter like this and you had your eye on this quadcopter, you should for sure consider it. Very capable quadcopter, you won't be disappointed with it. Especially if you do a couple of tweaks, which we'll get to right now. Alright, the first tip would be about the battery to use for this quadcopter, and not specifically one battery, but a type or size of battery. I've tried these on the quadcopter, a lithium ion pack from Z2HD, which turned out, this works, but this one is a little big. You'd ideally be using smaller lithium ion cells. So this is a pack of 18 650 cells, and with these the quadcopter feels too heavy. It is. This is far heavier than an 850 mAh 4S. So that didn't really work out. Maybe in the future I'll try, well, again, smaller lithium ion cells on quadcopters like this. This is basically the size of battery I'd suggest for this quadcopter, an 850 mAh 4S. And yeah, this R-line worked out well, but you could use other brands, types of course. And I also tried the 650 mAh version of that, and I'd say no to that. The quadcopter obviously flies on a 650 mAh, and if you fly the quadcopter without an action camera, yeah, but the flight time suffers more than the performance gains. The performance gain is hardly noticeable. Actually, I had a really hard time noticing any performance gain, and the flight time definitely suffers. The quadcopter feels very much at home with an 850 mAh 4S. So that's the Lipo choice I suggest for this quadcopter. Now, the second tip on this quadcopter is 100% mandatory to do. The VTX tables weren't set up on this quadcopter. Now, on that I should add that I have told Holybro about that, and they will change that in the future, in future batches. But you might end up with a Holybro Kopis Mini without the VTX table set up, and your VTX page in betaflight will look like this, completely not filled in. Now, I've already done a video on that. I'll link to that up there in the upper right corner. Go check it out. That video will tell you how to set that up. Very easy, but you definitely want to set that up correctly. Then that's Twitch. A desync, an ESC desync basically. Yeah, so I've done a lot of PID tuning on this quadcopter, but that Twitch has nothing to do with the PIDs. You need to go into the BL Heli 32 suite, and I'll have a link to that program. It's a separate program in the description of this video. And what I did is I lowered the ramp up power, and I'll put that on screen for you right now. Default it was set to 50%, and you can lower that to 40% or even 35%, and there won't be any performance downside to this change at all. You won't notice it at all while flying. The only thing you'll notice is that your quadcopter won't show these desyncs. So yeah, pretty easy. I will also tell Holybro about this, and I haven't heard back from them on that, so I don't know if future batches will have that change. So in general, is this a change you should consider on all 3-inch quadcopters, or maybe on all quadcopters? You could. Again, there's no real performance downside to this. Especially on 3-inch quadcopters, I'd say lower it to at least down to 40%, or maybe 35%. In the case of this Holybro, 40% fixed it. So there you go. Okay, more on the PID tune. The stock PID tune is probably stock betaflight. I'm not even completely sure, but it actually works It actually works pretty well. You can improve it by simply sliding this first slider, the master multiplier, down to 0.9, so 1 notch to the left. That's pretty typical actually on high power smaller quadcopters. So if you run any racing quadcopter and run betaflight 4.1 and up, you can slide that slider 1 notch back and your quadcopter will probably fly better. Now if you load this quadcopter up with a big Lipo and a big action camera, the stock tune will probably work out completely fine. But I'd still say experiment a little with it. The 0.9 setting here worked out well for me. Then there's the Expo, which makes the center feel of your sticks a little smoother. And that's on the same page on the second tab, rate profile settings. And I've used 0.35 on all axes, and that'll improve your video. Your captured video, make it a lot smoother. So yeah, I generally actually on my bigger quadcopters I don't use Expo, but on a smaller quadcopter like this and for cinematic purposes, I'd say add some Expo, it'll improve your video. So not really needed, but I think it'll perform better that way. And the stock, there was no Expo set up for this quadcopter. And that's basically it for the tips and tricks. Yeah, I have added RPM filtering to this quadcopter. This quadcopter has a BL3241 ESC. It has the right firmware. So basically you can simply enable RPM filtering on this quadcopter. However, I haven't really noticed any benefit on this quadcopter somehow. It didn't feel a lot better. The biggest improvement I saw was from the PID slider, and that's it. Enabling the RPM filtering, you can, definitely, it works, no problem at all. The motors don't get hot, nothing, there's no downside to it, let's put it like that. But I didn't see a benefit, but simply try it, I'd say. And that, guys, is it. That's my review on the Holybro Kopis. Very much recommended. Every time I fly it, I'm amazed by the power to weight ratio of this quadcopter. Often people say, oh, this 3-inch quadcopter flies like a 5-inch quadcopter, yay! Does this fly like a 5-inch quadcopter? Actually, the power to weight ratio on this quadcopter is better than on most 5-inch quadcopters. That's kind of a downside as well. It's a little harder to control maybe. It's also lighter obviously than a 5-inch quadcopter, and that extra weight of a 5-inch quadcopter helps you in shooting smooth videos. Shooting smooth videos with this 3-inch might require a little more pilot experience, but the quadcopter itself is definitely capable of it. So again, very much recommended. This is a very nice quadcopter. So well done Holybro. This was my first Holybro ever. So yeah, I actually feel like reviewing other Holybros now. Be on the lookout for that, of course, on my channel. If you're left with questions, hit me up a comment down below. I want to thank you for watching. Catch you on the next video. Bye bye.